You've just entered the Disaster Tough podcast, the place for emergency managers, first responders, and humanitarians who want to get the job done. Stories, lessons, and tips are provided by field experts. I'm your host, John Scardina, owner of Doberman Emergency Management and former federal emergency response official who's responded to some of the most extreme disasters. Disaster Tough is our mantra. It combines experience, training, and analytics in order to be successful at any stage within the disaster lifecycle. It means being a professional in emergency and disaster services. Doberman Emergency Management lives by this. If your organization needs to fill a gap, please contact us. We can help. Contact info is in the show notes. We also support other products and organizations that will increase your ability. For example, if you fight wildfires, hurricanes, a pandemic, any disaster in the field, at a hospital, or command center, listen up. You're missing out if you do not use L3 Harris for your radio comms. They are secure, portable, mobile, and scalable, which is great news for us in the field. A truly disaster-tough radio system. Check out the XL family of radios by clicking on the show notes or simply go to l3harris.com.
The battle to monitor and contain COVID-19 just got exponentially better for us. We are officially introducing an electronic, reusable COVID-19 test through our sponsors. It's called COVID Plus Test, created by Tiger Tech, distributed by FS Global. This is the first FDA-authorized, rapid, non-invasive pre-screener. It's incredibly easy to use. Forget those one-time use swabs. This is a disaster-tough technology. For more information on COVID Plus Test, check out our show notes. Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this week's episode. Man, you've heard me talking about drones so many times on the show because of my background with the use of drones and doing it with preliminary damage assessments. There is this scene, there's this random scene. Let me cue this up. We might put this in post-production from, I think it's Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where the father goes, "I'm finally not alone." That's how I feel today, because I am meeting with the man, the myth, the legend, Fritz, who's from Skydio. He's the Skydio drone expert there for search and rescue, for public safety, all this kind of stuff, because he has a background in it. He really is a pioneer in using the use of drones for tactical level response. So all of you guys out there who are in, first responder capabilities or doing tactical response, damage assessments, you name it, this guy is an expert. He can talk to it. Fritz, welcome to the show.
Wow, thanks, John. It's quite an intro. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, you know what? Like I said, it's pretty exciting for me because, when you're talking about pioneering drones in agencies or in emergency services, a lot of people don't understand like what it takes to get that done, and the perception behind it, and then once you implement it, that change that happens, and to see all the positive changes. And so maybe we can just kind of start there of how did you get into the use of drones? I understand that you were doing SWAT with drones. How did you find that capability? And then what were some of the outcomes from using drones on your side?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of became a hobbyist and got a Phantom 4 and started flying it around, and that, the ability to get the thing to return to home every time, I really started to see how valuable that would be for just public safety use cases in general. Being a guy, I spent 5 years on SWAT, obviously some entry time as well as some sniper time. And really, when I saw drones, I wasn't on SWAT at the time, but I thought, wow, this is great to be able to send in, we were doing a ground-based robots and other solutions where you want to see what's going on in there before you send people, but having a drone that could not get caught on the steps and just fly right in and clear the whole house without putting people in harm's way was like pretty intuitive, a no-brainer. Obviously I wasn't the first to think of that, but that's really where my mind first started going with drones. And I would get little FPV drones, buy them for like $100 and fly them all around the investigations and blowing paper off desks and getting everybody excited about it. Wouldn't this be awesome if we had these at Chula Vista, where I worked, Chula Vista Police Department. And a buddy of mine, Vern Salee, who's now at Axon after he retired, working with Axon Air, he started the drone program, and I kind of was looking from the sidelines. And then when I promoted to captain and got the opportunity to take over the team, we were swapping around collateral duties. He was like, yeah, sure, great. We really hadn't got into the operational aspect of Chula Vista yet. And so when I came on, that was my first role. It's just, let's get these things up. Let's get them in the air. Let's start showing the value to the operators, because, until you see it, you don't really realize the value that they get. And then once you have it, you just don't want to do anything without them.
It's kind of like, for me, it was like, first of all, blowing paper off the table. I remember that when we got the drone, I was in a joint field office in Hurricane Harvey, and I was so excited to use it. I put the drone in the room and took off, no experience whatsoever, and immediately blew all the paper off everybody's desk and flew it right into some blue lines, like the Ethernet cables that were hanging down from the ceiling. I was like, oh, so we there was a learning curve, but that learning curve was what, 5 minutes? I mean, it's amazing what drone capabilities can do now. And from my end, same thing kind of happened. We knew we had one use case that we wanted to use it for, and as soon as you do it, you're like, oh, there's 100 other use cases that you can put this for. A big one is saving resources and time. Another one is just not putting people in harm's way, right? I mean, you're talking, and the ceiling to, compared to a robotic, or compared to, a helicopter with a manned helicopter, a small UAS drone is, a game changer. You can just put it right, like you said, put it right in the house and, start seeing capabilities. And so, like, the way I want to go through the discussion today, I liked what Skydio had on your website. Now, this isn't a big ad. I'm not an official sponsor. I just like what you guys have, and so I have to say that for my audience. But there was 4 capabilities for this drone that I liked a lot, and the reason why I'm excited to endorse it is because it's an American-made drone, assembled here, the whole deal, and for U.S. agencies, that's the hot topic right now, and it seems like an amazing drone. And so the 4 topics I thought we could kind of just run down today. 1 was situational awareness. 2, search and rescue, which you highlighted. 3, hostile scene and de-escalation. And 4, crime and accident use cases. And so, just like backing up, situational awareness. Can you talk about, remember, we have a lot of emergency managers on here, first responders, humanitarians, military personnel who've never used a drone before. They see it as a hobbyist thing. And so my job today is to have an expert on here to say, hey, this is why you need this. This will help out our field a lot. So from the perspective of situational awareness, talk to us about what you have found drones can do.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on the 4, probably the biggest, most common use cases for public safety, emergency management. And a little bit about my history. I was on the Type 3 incident management, all hazard incident management team at Chula Vista. It was a regional source. I was the ops section chief, and you do a lot of decision making at a remote location, and you're delegating a lot of activity out with units in the field, and having a situational awareness of what's going on out there, whether it's at an EOC or an incident, command post or whatever, is huge. And so, on major incidents, you get downlinks from helicopters, and once you have that, you're like, I want that on every incident, big and small. And that's what drones let you have, is that eyes on the situation, so that the decision makers aren't making the decision based on radio chatter or third-hand information. They get the context of video, we all know. And that's kind of, that led me into the ideas related to drone as first responder, and then specific to Skydio. That's the goal, is to get that capability out into the field broadly and on to the most, what we think is a routine incident that you wouldn't be using a manned aircraft for, that quickly turn deadly. And we all know how those situations can happen. And so to have a drone that, is, the foundation of autonomy, easy to fly, get it in the air. It's hard to crash. It's, as you said, American made, NDA compliant, so grant money can buy it, and get these things out into the hands of people that don't necessarily have 100 flight hours on the sticks, right? That you feel confident flying in obstacle-rich environments and flying below the tree line, looking into windows and doing all these things that these drones can do. And to have a drone to help you do that with the autonomy that comes with Skydio platform, I think is huge. Like I mentioned, the first drone, just that our return to home feature and the hover in place. The first drone that Chula Vista got was a gift from SDG&E, and you could literally kill yourself with that thing because it wouldn't have to have skill to make it hover in place. And once that hover in place became a tool for the masses, and that's what this next level of autonomy is making people who they're professional cops and firefighters. They're not professional drone pilots, but they want to use it in their work. And so that's the foundation, is to make it democratize this asset and make it something we can use more often on a daily basis early in the incident, and get the advantage of these big resources on the big stuff down to the most time sensitive, smaller incident, so they don't grow into big ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think we said it last week on our show, or 2 weeks ago with Pete Gaynor. He was for those who know, he was the interim head of DHS, and he was head of FEMA. He was on here 2 weeks ago and said, all disasters are local, right? We've heard that before. He mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. And all disasters hit hardest local because it takes a lot of resource in a catastrophic event to know what's going on in the field. Talk about the hover in place capability. Now, somebody's listening to that, they're like, what does that even mean for me? Well, we even played with the idea of tethering like cell connections or radio connections to hard hit areas. Okay, put 5 drones up with a tether on there, so we have continual power, and now you have connectivity over mountain ranges. We've talked about that. We've talked about all these different capabilities. We used drones for herd migrations when volcanoes went out, and so that putting in the right place to help the cattle go in a different direction from the volcanic eruption, that was a big deal, right? And just to have that situational awareness of agriculture and how these things are interacting with the environment, let alone people, right? And then see okay, we have a potential for a mudslide here because it's been raining heavily for the last 5 days. It's let up. Okay, do we want to send out resources to see if there's going to be a mudslide and they get hit by it on their way out there? No, let's put up a drone out there, right? And so it expands your sphere of influence, to a huge range, right? To be able to see that in real time, like you said, as soon as you see it, it clears up so many issues. Another one that I just thought of, another use case was going back to the preliminary damage assessments, wildfires. So most drones that are used on the federal level are like the Reaper drone is, high altitude, infrared, right? So
Right.
we have a good understanding of where the fire is, but it's not really great for situational awareness at the ground level because that image can be completely whited out from high altitude drones. Only small drones, low level, 200 to 400, 1,200 feet, if you have an SDI COA, can see fine detail and say, oh, okay, with the wind and everything going, the firefighter is actually behind the line of fire. And so again, situational awareness there, right? And so talk about a huge capability. You talked about SWAT. Does SWAT, remind me, does SWAT SWAT obviously deals with crowd control, right? Within crowd control, drones have a capability there too, right? Of just not putting your guys in harm's way, of just having that situational awareness for crowds.
Yeah, no, SWAT, it kind of depends on the agency. We've moved to, most agencies move to sort of a mobile field force, MMFF, professional crowd control training, which is different than you might get from special weapons and tactics. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap, and you'll see both resources at major events, depending on what's going on. But in terms of using drones for crowd control or for just situational awareness during a large crowd events, it's it's in the old days, quote unquote, you'd have to get to a position to be able to see the crowd, right? You can't do that if you're standing on the ground at the same level. So you had people getting up on rooftops and stuff and just being able to like see what's going on, because if someone's getting hurt in the center of a crowd, how are you going to see that if you're on the outside edge, look at standing at ground level? If there's threats to the crowd where they may be approaching cars, and we've seen what has happened with cars running into crowds. So I know there's concern from crowds who are doing lawful protests that drones are there to like spy on them or surveil them, but every public safety agency I talk to there's a responsibility they have to protect that crowd, and you can't do it just by reacting to what's going on. You have to get to a position where you can see the crowd, you can see what's going on, you can see approaching threats, you can see areas where the crowd is heading, so you can stop traffic and cordon off any kind of incoming threats to them. So you'd be irresponsible really not to have sort of an overwatch position on these crowds. You owe it to the crowd to understand you're responsible for protecting them, so you got to understand what's happening and be able to manage resources. It's kind of a team effort, much like it'd be hard for a coach to know what's going on without sort of game day film, that top down look at his team as they handle the situation. And that's the same with crowd control.
I like that, Alan. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I'm pretty passionate about this. That I think, like I said, passionate. I think people are pretty stupid when they think about the privacy of drones and understanding people in public spaces, because I'm not even talking about a protest. Let's talk about a concert. Let's talk about any kind of open venue. You have 400,000 people taking live video of everything around them. You have 50 satellites up in the air, just, Google Earth, call it whatever you will, seeing what's going on. It's public space anyways. You have film crews there, you have news, you have everybody else. Any kind of public event, there is so much data being collected on people anyways, that when somebody says like, oh my gosh, the drones are spying on people. Actually, you're spying on yourself when you're taking your camera over everybody. So I don't get it. I guess there's real concerns there, but I think they're kind of just stupid, to be honest. But I don't know. So I don't know. What's your take on that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get that sentiment for sure. I do feel, as ex-cop working for the government, we do have a responsibility to be transparent. The data that the government gets isn't like the data that citizens or private sector gets.
Fair enough.
There's there's a fear that there's an incrementalness about things that we that's reality. So we do need to be certainly respectful of those fears, even though I think, like you say, some of it's because of the unknown of what drones are. It's a new fascinating technology. There's a lot of movies that show drones that sort of do drones being used to equipped with weapons and being used to like prevent the hero from escaping, right? So I definitely get that sentiment. And I think when the public is exposed to what drones do and how they do it, every time I see they're very supportive. As long as we in the law enforcement, public safety, emergency management remain transparent, use it in the right way, definitely share the successes, so that if people say we don't want drones, they know at what cost that comes. That is a huge win for the drone industry. And so I think transparency through and through is, we're responsibility to protect people's privacy, but we also have a responsibility to show how these things are being used to save lives.
I appreciate that answer a lot, because usually, like I said, I'm a hardliner on it. I'm like, come on. But I think you're right. As government bodies, there has to be transparency, there has to be data acquisition and PII protection, and all of that goes into play. And for sure, and as it should. However, in a public space, it's already being collected, and that's my call. I love how you said, like, people always like it. I had this cool story where I think I shared it before on the podcast, so it's kind of a repeat for some of the people listening. But the first time we were using drones to do preliminary damage assessments in a wildfire, I was standing on one side of our vehicle with our spotter, and I could see in the drone an individual walking up behind, kind of like walking up behind the vehicle. And I was like, he knows I can see him, right? But while I was watching this, I said, hey, Kyle, just let you know, some guy's walking up behind us. And he's like, okay. So I went over to talk to him. And the first thing is, what are you guys doing? And he thought we were private sector. He thought we were just trying to take cool images or whatever. But as soon as we said, hey, we're trying to figure out how many homes are damaged as fast as we can to be able to help you out, the guy's attitude flipped immediately. And like, that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to survivors and helping out survivors as fast as humanly possible. And I'm not one of the guys who thinks drones are the only thing we should be doing, but it is a tool that allows us to move into that space to help out people faster. And so that's the mindset, that's the cultural shift I want to see happen in emergency management, is like how to help out survivors fastest, responsibly, but fastest. Drones by far right now are that cutting edge technology that shows data impacting decision making.
No, that's a great story. I mean, that's instant transparency, right? It's not a tool to be used to control you, or it's an asset used for your benefit, the community's benefit. And as long as they see it as their asset, then they embrace it and run with it.
I love that. The community assets, right? Drones are a community asset for life-saving, life-sustaining, and emergency response.
Yeah, no question.
So, admittedly, I do not have a lot of search and rescue experience. My search and rescue experience is limited to a bunch of training, and in large-scale disasters, as a GIS guy, I would point search and rescue operators in the right direction, saying, hey, this is going to flood, this levee's going to go, we think this dam is going to give, wherever. And so I would point. So can you kind of share us your experiences and kind of help us understand like how drones impact specifically search and rescue? You talked about clearing facilities. What else can it do for you?
So, and I'll admit, I got a ton of search and rescue experience as a cop over 27 years, right? Looking for lost kids and walk-away adults and Alzheimer's patients. Chula Vista is a relatively urban environment, so I don't get a lot of the wide open field search and rescue stuff. I do talk to agencies, daily, who do this quite a bit, right? And a lot of rural areas across the country. It's a huge tool. Obviously a thermal is a great way to pick up heat signatures. So that's a needed aspect for any search and rescue tool. Certainly the sooner you get something up in the, when it's a walk away adult or a missing child, the better, right? The less far they can get from the point of last seen. And so, just in general, it's like, again, it's just hard to see anything from the ground level. And so, typically if you don't have a manned helicopter with really a robust FLIR system available, and most agencies don't have those at a moment's notice, your drone that's, the drone that's in the trunk, you throw it up right away and do as much as you can in terms of searching fields and eliminating areas that you don't need to hand search or walk through, so you can concentrate on those most likely areas. I know the Civil Air Patrol, which is a huge search and rescue, civilian arm of the Air Force, they've recently purchased, scores of Skydios, X2s to be delivered that have a thermal, precisely because they're a great drone for a very large team that you can't, all these people can't spend hours and hours and hours being, drone experts. So it's a great tool to have quickly, throw it up, and then not only be able to see what's high above, but be able to navigate down below the canopy, right? There's two types of drones in a search and rescue situation. There's a high up overwatch drone that looks over a broad swath of areas. And then there's drones that can kind of go where humans can't go on foot, that's invisible from above, right? Along riverbanks that are tree line covered, you have your overwatch drone, you notice that there's no heat signatures in the center of the body water or the river, but you don't know what's along the banks, right? And so you can wait for a team that might jump in a boat and sail down that river and look to the sides, or you get one person out with a drone, fly low along the river, looking along the banks, clearing that in the first 10 or 15 minutes. Time's not on your side. So, having something that's in the trunk of pretty much every first responder or on the fire truck or whatever that can do both be comfortable in both environments, that overwatch and close to the ground or in obstacle-rich environments, is your perfect layered approach to search and rescue as it relates to using drones. And certainly having the sensors on there that's going to be able to see what you need to see, right? Your thermal sensor that can see heat signatures, and then your cameras that, high quality cameras that we can see where we need to see. Basically, a drone is just putting a subject matter expert somewhere they can't otherwise be. It's kind of an avatar for a decision maker, search and rescuer. And it's just, the use cases and the environments where they add value is unlimited.
That's awesome. You said a word that struck a chord with me in a very good way. When I go out and I do presentations, I often get requested to talk about my experiences in the field. And I remind the audience constantly that the number one problem we have in emergency services is time. Time changes everything. It's relentless, obviously, but the more time it takes to do something, the more problems you're going to have. As soon as you get behind the ball, you're never going to get in front of it. I've seen it way too many times. And again, just this is like I said, a big ad for drones and trying to get people to change their cultural mindset, because hard to get to places, check. Quickly going over an area, check. One thing that drones can do that the naked eye can't do is point cloud. I was a big fan of doing point cloud. The shape. Hey, we want to be able to find a body. Well, we found it of the shape of an arm in the field, right? And we have millions of points, and now we're using artificial intelligence to scan over that. So clearing banks, looking for the heat signature. You're now doing multiple levels that the naked eye just can't do. Even if you're looking at that riverbed, right? Infrared can see there's something over there. Human eye might not be able to see it, right? Especially if it's buried on a surface level. And that's a big deal for catastrophic level too of buildings that have been thrashed, right? So these down buildings and trying to get into places where we haven't shored up yet. So huge use cases there. Okay, so another one that admittedly I stay away from as much as possible. In fact, I don't get on this too much on the show, but I did way more man-made stuff in DC than I ever want to talk about. However, hostile scenes and de-escalation. Talk to us about drones and hostile scenes and de-escalation.
Well, I'll touch a little bit on your time thing as well with the de-escalation, because the thing I'm probably most known for is the Dronus first responder use case at Chula Vista Police Department that we done through the IPP, where essentially you've got drones nested on rooftops within the city, and as soon as a call comes in, they respond the drone to that location, getting ahead of ground units. And that's something Chula Vista Police is still doing to this day. There are over 6,000 missions. They're doing, pretty much every day, all day, and literally hundreds of use cases where they're on the scene, whether it's a walk-away child or a robbery that just occurred, or people fighting in the street, or a car accident, or anything you want to send emergency responders to get the drone there first before people are in harm's way, and get someone who's an experienced incident manager on scene. And I think from your audience, they understand, a lot of times the experienced ICs come in well into the incident after a lot of the first responders are there doing as best they can in the first moments. And the idea of getting the incident commander as the first responder, some experienced decision maker who's not in harm's way, who basically essentially arrives as a drone and basically an avatar for their decision making capability to see the situation and then guide units in, is like the ultimate in terms of the shortcut in time. And that's kind of what your example is just to get a jump start on time and see the future, whether that's the indoor case where you want to send a drone in before people. It totally changes the paradigm. And so I may have gone on a little tangent there, but your time thing kind of made me think of
that. That's cool.
Yeah. And then the other aspect that you had mentioned was the de-escalation. Again, that's a lot of times officers, emergency management, fire, they rush into a situation because they can't sit and wait and plan, right? They don't, They don't have enough information. People might be in harm's way while they're waiting. So they rush into the situation as necessary. Then they got to figure it out once they get there. So any opportunity to slow them down and say, look, we're on scene. I've got a drone. It's not in harm's way. I can see what's happening. If anything changes, I'll let you know, but you're perfectly, it's perfectly safe right now to stage, wait for less lethal, wait for a canine, wait for the right resources with the fire, and then not rush in, and then not be forced to be in a situation where you're not prepared. And that is a very effective tool to de-escalate, right? And getting a drone into a room where a person may be holed up. Once you send the drone in, either you find out he's in there and you don't have to go in, you know right where they are, or you find out it's clear and essentially means you don't have to go in. So either way, it just kind of changes the whole dynamic. You're stacked up on this door about to go in, and then once you send in a drone, it just changes the whole dynamic because now you know whether there's threat or not. It's just a paradigm shift, really. And so in de-escalation, that's all about that, is bringing the right tools, the right decisions, the right problem solving methods to the situation so that you're not hitting every problem with the hammer, right? Not everything is a nail, but historically, we just respond and then kind of make it up as we get on the scene, right? Do the best we can.
That's so true. That's all true, 100%. So, like, I think of make it up on the scene, right? So, real world application on my end, dealing with active assailant, active shooter events.
Right.
And, statistically, as soon as first responders are in a facility, active shooters change their motive from finding innocence to either killing themselves, or addressing the first responders. It's like 99.9% of the time. As soon as we get people in there, assets in there, those things change. And I do wonder what the capability of having a law enforcement drone specifically going into an area just for sensory overload to psychologically broken, terrorists or active shooters. Obviously, the sound of the drone, the location of the drone, makes them shift just enough to where people's lives could be saved, or the reminder to potential survivors, help is on the way. Whatever. There could be lots of different use cases for helping not just the survivor, but preventing the loss of life of a responder who is going in there and has to address a threat who is extreme, right? And I think about that a lot because I had to deal with that a lot. And, at Doberman, we teach an active shooter course, and we go through, we're like a data-backed company, like we're really focused on data. And so when we do our active shooter course, it's like 2 hours of just use case after use case. We're just drilling it into people's head. Like, it doesn't mean just run, hide, fight, right? It means freaking barricade, and what the difference of barricade means versus, this and fighting, what fighting means. It means like stopping the threat, or the threat will hurt you, right?
Right.
And how fast those scenes are. You talked about time. We talked about time. Most active shooters are 10 minutes or under. And so you trying to figure out where the person is, trying to figure out, your other first responders are showing up on scene. Everybody's showing up on scene. And you got the drone in the back, battery on, shove it into the building, figure where this thing is out as fast as humanly possible for, even for clearing rooms. What is it? Diamond Formation's 4-man team. So you have diamond formation versus drone. Okay. 4 living people, drone. I don't know. It sounds like there's a lot of use cases there as well.
Yeah. So I'll talk on broadly, because you're hitting on a lot of points, and the work you're doing there is so critical. So I'll talk over you, and then I'll talk specific to Skydio, because we have a tool, I think, that really could help in these kind of situations, and hopefully it never gets used for it, right? Because it never happens again. Exactly. But we know the answer there. And there's like a couple of really big paradigm shifts where everything just kind of turned on its head, like 9/11, right? We used to hijacker. Everybody said, hey, if you get hijacked, just sit and cooperate, right? That totally changed in a heartbeat. From the moment the first one, the planes crashed in the tower to Flight 93, right? That's no longer what we do. We fight back, right? the big paradigm shift, as you well know, Columbine, where you can't just sit and set up a perimeter. The people in there aren't there to negotiate. They're there to slaughter. Like your Joe citizen in the neighborhood got it before the police officers did, because we're trained a certain way, and it was hard for us to change our paradigm. And once we understood that difference, then our training changed. And we began to learn with that incident, the LA shootout, that we can't wait an hour for special weapons and tactics and these really, effective tools that require a lot of training and a lot of expertise and money. We have to push these capabilities to the front line. They got to be there in the first second. So now you have officers with AR solutions, right? So they have active guns, accurate guns that can fight off serious threats immediately. We have active shooter training, which you talked about, where it's, don't sit and wait, go in. That's what you're paid for. Train to reduce the risk, but you're going to have to take risks because there are innocent lives at stake. And drones are part of that, right? The Dronus first responder is that type of use case of getting the drones there first, whether it's to go indoors first or on scene first, is going to add that value of sort of an intelligence and making those people that have to put their lives at risk do so with a little more knowledge and intelligence. And then to have the tools there, right? That's a lot of what we talk about at Skydio is, the drones that are back at the station are no good to you in those situations, right? It's got the drone in your trunk is better than the best drone back at the station. It's what you have with you. So have the ones that people are comfortable with flying. You can train them. You're comfortable with giving them to them, and they're easy enough to fly where you can fly them in these type of difficult environments. The Skydio 2, it's the first drone out. It's not an expensive option. A lot of public safety have it, and it's this type of situation where it really could add value because you can get it up in a minute or two. You can just fly it in an obstacle-rich environment with no skill whatsoever. The first time someone's got their sticks on it, they can fly this thing through a mall, a business park, a school. And so you can imagine a stack of 4 or 5 people, maybe the person in the last part of the stack just throws the drone up front and it's running point around these corners, clearing the area, because you don't have time. You have people bleeding out. You have victims that you have to assess, and you got large areas that you need to clear and secure. And to be able to do that where a person's head isn't the first thing around the corner, but a drone that's, there. And that's going to take time, right, to get it up. But, clearing these big business parks takes a while after an active shooter, and you got to do it safely because you never know.
We took forever to clear the Navy Yard. Navy Yard was the Navy Yard shooting. Through the beast of burden and that after action, and you had every federal and state agency dressed, not dressed, uniform, had the badge, not have the, everybody was there. And so you have a ton of people. Here's a really sad statistic. Again, this is kind of the drones, kind of a tangent, but the Parkland shooting officer, the one who waited outside, people give him a lot of crap. People don't understand that 30 to 40% of the officers, single officers that show up on scene, die in an active shooter. Not injured, not whatever, die because they have no backup. And when you're talking over a third, that's a big deal. And and you want to come in with a lot of force. And what I mean by that is an overwhelmingly amount of what I call sensory overload of the threat, so they don't know what's going on, which causes them to pause, which causes us to be able to end the situation. Again, a drone is the force multiplier, even for a single officer who's on scene. Distraction, sensory overload. Let me take care of this. The other one, which is a huge tangent, Navy Yard shooting, the officer who lost their life. Unfortunately, they heard the sound. You could see them like, was that the sound of a gun? And they holstered their weapon again. And when they holstered their weapon, the active shooter came around the corner and killed him. And like I said, that has really nothing to do with drones, but I'm super passionate about that because we hope active shooter training is the most worthless training people will ever get. But if they do get it, it could save their lives. And now we're talking about it in a cool new way that I've never really thought about before, to be honest, is the use of technologies as a force multiplier for first responders. As a guy who deals with catastrophic disaster on a large scale, hurricanes, wildfires, that kind of stuff, it's amazing to have somebody who's an expert in tactics to be able to say, like I said, all disasters are local. All disasters fail at the tactics that they fail at the tactics. So give you every resource you need to be successful. We kind of hit a lot on the crime and accident, the side of the house, and so just like looking at that time, is there anything else that you think that could help out somebody, like I said, a first responder, emergency manager who's listening to this, who's now hopefully on board with the idea of drones? What would you say to them for accident and crime scene awareness for drones?
So that's another thing about data that you just can't get any other way. And it's not necessarily a time sensitive one, but there's a safety component specifically to accident reconstruction, which wasn't something I did as a police officer at all. I would never work traffic, but certainly that's a lot. I talked to a lot of people doing that. Certainly now with our 3D scan solution coming out from Skydio, where it's a data capture tool where it, flies around in a 3D environment, capturing evidence, photos, and something you can upload into a photogrammetry tool and makes great evidence. Take measurements. It's a solution for your court, and an investigative tool. And to do this, instead of shutting down a roadway for 4 hours, with a team of 5 people and flares everywhere, to be able to do it in 30 minutes, and so you're not out in the roadway, the drone's out in the roadway collecting that. I mean, that's a use case that's out there. It's pretty obvious. It's a unique tool that Skydio has, but accident reconstruction in general is just a way to really, good police work, collect evidence in a way that's useful, that you understand what happened and record the incident in a way that's manageable. And the more, go from a 2D sketch by hand to like a real-time 3D model, and have it be done by one person regardless, who, is not an expert in anything other than just the workflow, then, I mean, what an amazing tool.
Okay, so you share tactics side, I'll share strategic side, federal side. So it made me think of debris pile estimations. So when the debris pile collection sites, they bring the trucks bring, it depends on the state. Each state is different, I'll say that. But what happens a lot of times is the trucks back in and they fill up and they back it. And what happens is it creates a donut effect where as they're all backing in, there's actually a giant hole in the middle of this debris pile. We're talking about 80 feet up by, 125 feet wide. What the state sometimes does in a disaster is, by contract, they will look at their circumference and multiply it by the height and figure out their dome, and they will charge for that. Essentially, they're charging for a giant hole in the middle. Well, if you're trying to do accident reconstruction, So what I did with the drone is I went over to a couple of these giant donuts, and I saved the federal government like $6 million in 20 minutes by showing that they were paying for a giant hole in the middle. And my counterparts, it was just like, wait, what? I was like, weren't you calling it a toy the other day? A $6 million recovery of just waste. Now, I'm sure the construction company was pissed, but at the same time, it cuts down on fraud, waste, and abuse, and it is tax dollars, right? We are government agencies. So like a big one there. And it goes back to that earlier point about cloud, the point cloud. And people don't really understand what point cloud is. So basically what you're talking about is if I take a picture of my mic and, traditionally there's a 2D image of my picture, right? What you're talking about is the amazing thing. And I think Skydio paired up with, it's Esri's product, the, Drone Deploy.
Drone Deploy, right?
Yeah. And so for those listeners, it's as if I can put my mouse on this mic and start spinning the mic, and I can sit at 360 degrees, up, down, left, right, and you're able to get a true picture. Another one on the big scale stuff, like, so obviously most of my experiences with floods and that kind of stuff. Let's say it was a hazmat incident. We do it with floods where the water actually went, right? But we have to worry about hazmat, unintentional or intentional. If it happened in a large city, where is all that material? Are you really going to send in first responders who can be impacted by that by accidentally touching something and then no, like you got to figure out what's going on in a large scale incident. And, you know, whether you're outfitting the drone with infrared or chemical detection capabilities, now you're getting a 3D image of like literally where every single particle is. And it's a huge game changer. So I'm glad we ended up talking about it. So,
Well, $6 million is a lot to brag about. There's quite a bit of ROI there. So
I know. Tell me about it. And that was one mission. Another mission is a brag moment. The wildfires, Southern California wildfires. First time. This is why drones are now SOP and all federal responses, and why Civil Air Patrol was contracted by FEMA. I went out there. I was pilot in command. By the way, I hate that term. That's a term we need to change, and that's a bit much for drone pilot, whatever. But I was the pilot in command, and I had my spotter. We had 3 GIS people back at the JFO, and I went out there and we found 31 more homes than a 33-person ground crew PDA team. We did it in a third amount of time. We did that at almost no cost, and we actually recovered 8 homes that the Reaper drone thought had been destroyed because, again, that whiteout image. And you're talking about 2 people versus 33 people in the field. When they were out there for 3 or 4 days, we were out there for 1 day, and we fed it back to the JFO in almost real time. Mm-hmm. They were able to analyze the data, and we were able to get the state their federal declaration faster because we were able to prove the economic loss faster. And we actually worked really well with the ground crews because they were able to get into areas, we were able to get into areas, but when they got blocked, they were like, hey, can you just fly your drone over here? Yeah, sure, no problem. We'll be there in an hour. Pack up, go over, open, flew over an entire neighborhood, found more homes. And then the other part of that was wildfires. If you're on the East Coast, you might not know this, wildfires burn left to right. Or sorry, top down, not left to right. So your home can look perfectly fine from the outside, but the entire inside is gutted because an ember burns right through the middle of your home. And so that's the other reason why we were able to find so many homes. So just like it's a wonderful tool. It doesn't replace CDA teams. Those ground truth information that you're getting is great, but talk about cost saving. You multiply that hundreds of thousands of disasters that we go through globally a year, or the 300 active disasters that we're dealing with right now. Administrator Criswell, you're going to be on the show here soon. We applaud you for stepping into FEMA. Now 300 disasters are currently under her belt. So, it's just crazy stuff that we're talking about here. So I can talk about drones forever, but yeah. So
no, that's huge. That experience, is invaluable. And once you guys are on scene, adding that kind of value to people who are decision makers and responsible for doing it quickly, efficiently, safely, they don't do it any other way, right? And that's a lot of what we're trying to do is just let people know this tool is out there. If you don't have it, ask for it, get it. Once you have it, it speaks for itself.
It's kind of fun to talk about both sides of this house right now because Skydio is obviously a for-profit drone company who has a really good product, by the way. Again, non-official, but just my own personal feelings on it. But it sounds like you're making all the right moves by saying, hey, let's address all these different issues, whether it's situational awareness, threat detection, de-escalation, crime and accident scenes. Like in terms of a for-profit company, you're very socially conscious and you're trying to do something, it's a weird word now. I would say righteous. It's a righteous endeavor to be able to impact this space. And so I applaud you, Fritz, who, by the way, before we start recording, everybody, I realized that Fritz is the prince of drones because it's just one name. It's not, Fritz O'Brien or whatever. It's just Fritz. So soon it's going to be a drone symbol. It's going to be, a quadcopter. It's going to be a symbol. So you're not allowed to sit next to him in award ceremonies. But Fritz, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for talking to us about Skydio's capabilities. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've been watching you guys from afar, and I think you're doing really great things there. And so just thanks again for talking on the show and talking about tactics versus strategics in the drone space. Thanks again.
No, John, appreciate being on here. I mean, your list of who you've had on as the who's who to be included in that is a great honor, and it's really it's great to talk with you. The work you're doing is amazing. We're glad to be on the same path with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we can have you back on in the future again as new capabilities roll out. And again, I applaud you and both Skydio on the work you're doing. For all those listeners who learned something today, you should have learned something today because we talked about a lot of really great things. We got to say, we say it every week. It's kind of monotonous, but we're going to say it. You got to give us that 5-star rating and subscribe if you liked it. You got to send us a comment. Now, I say this, I bring this up every single week. Thank you so much for those emails to info@dobermanemg.com. I always put it out there, but I really put it out there for if you want to work with Doberman Emergency Management. However, if you want to talk to Fritz, if you have questions about using drones, or you want to talk about Skydio, if you have a question, we'll do them a favor. We'll put Skydio's link in our show notes so you can check it out there. But you can also put your question, put your comment out on social media so he can see it immediately. And so we can start addressing some of these ideas. Change your culture. Use drones. It's an amazing tool, as you heard, for the last 50 minutes or so on our show. And we'll see you back next week.